Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Wildy, Simmonds and Hill publishing. It's on agricultural tenancies. It's an important area of law which is actually quite specialised. The book that I'm looking at is a third edition now, and it's been taken over and written by Nigel Davis. Elizabeth and I talked about the book because I thought it was quite an interesting one, bearing in mind the special relationship that tenancies involving agricultural land actually have in relation to the law of real property generally. And for our title, for the book review we've written, we've given it this title: For All Those New to Agricultural Tenancies, Law and Practice, this book is for you. And let's have a look at it first of all. Here it is. It's a paperback. You can see it there. The spine. And then there's a bit of blurb on the back explaining who the people are and what actually the book contains. Let's just have a little look at it. It runs to 266 pages. There is actually a relatively short index at the back, and that's by page number. And you can see how it's set out there. Then you've got paragraph numbering, of course, at the sides, 11 being the chapter number, and then the actual paragraphing. The front of the book, there's the front page there, the main front page. Then after that you get some detail. 2018 is when it was published. It's dedicated to the memory of Nigel's grandfather. There's a little dedication for you to read. It's always nice to see the dedications. Now, the book itself, this is the setup. There we go. Content section, basic information. You see it's all laid out pretty clearly, so there shouldn't be any difficulty in finding things. And then you can see part 2 then goes on to notices and precedents. And as I say, there are a total of 11 chapters, the last chapter being on further reading, because I think this book is aimed, generally speaking, at people who have a general knowledge of the law but need a bit more. And of course the specific piece of legislation that we're talking about, which is what is behind all of this, is the Agricultural Tenancies Act of 1995, and this, and of course the notices thereafter. And this book of course has been updated and expanded to take account of everything. Nigel wrote quite a useful preface which is worth reading, just to get an idea of where we go, because my old tutor Angela Sydenham, going back a long time now, wrote the original book. There's the table of cases, not very many of them. Statutes, again, it's mainly the legislation. You can see it's all split out. You can see there's quite a lot of detail there as well, which I think is helpful. And then after that you've got some statutory instruments. Never fail to be there these days. Then there's actually a table of HM Revenue and Customs material, and it's a tax bulletin from April 1996. Then there's some European material, and then we get into the various parts. You can see that part 1 starts it off, which gives you the background definitions and so forth, and you can see how the book runs through. And generally it's very much in keeping with the house style of Wildy, Simmonds and Hill. There is actually a little bit of footnoting, but not much. You'll be most pleased to hear. And what I did like about it is there's a lot to do with drafting. So I think if you are involved in practice involving this particular area, this book is for you. And I would like to say at this stage that I believe Wildy, Simmonds and Hill publishing do give us as lawyers some of the most important specific practice books. I don't review these books for any monetary purpose whatsoever. I do it purely and simply because if I have a case coming in, this type of book may actually be directly relevant, and in this case it has been directly relevant to a particular case I'm dealing with. And one of the reasons that I think these reviews are important is so that you as the general public will, if you're unrepresented, will have an idea of the literature available. But even if you are a practitioner, you may not know much about this particular area of law, and this is one way of conducting further legal research. So let me talk about the book. What I'm saying is, if you know very little then about agricultural tenancies, this book's for you. because what Wildy, Simmonds and Hill have done, they always produce highly relevant practical titles for practitioners, and this work, I think, fits the bill nicely for anyone involved in this area of law. It's not an academic work in that sense, because it's very much of a, if I can use the expression, a hands-on approach. The author, of course, Nigel Davis, as I've indicated, offers us an array of his professional expertise by means of procedural checklists, very useful, very logical structure, dealing with the most significant problems which you may encounter in what is a most fascinating aspect of the law of real property. And as I've indicated, Nigel has succeeded the very excellent Angela Sydenham as the author for the 3rd edition, and Angela will be known to many of you for her other textbooks. Now, Davis also brings to us his particular knowledge as a specialist in agricultural law over the last 40 years, and he's an accredited mediator, and he has, of course, substantial experience in areas of landlord and tenant, arbitrations of tribunals, partnerships, and the dreaded common agricultural policy policy reforms. Now, CAP itself, of course, we don't know where we're going at the moment with Brexit, but certainly the common agricultural policy itself will, I would have thought, be very much up for review from 2019 onwards. I'm not going to say any more about that because this book is very much for now, and I hope it is of assistance to both landlords and tenants. And Davis has expanded the 3rd edition. It's his decision, of course, to do that, and I'm delighted he has done, to offer the novice, basically someone who hasn't got a lot of knowledge of this area, a concise introduction to the law of agricultural tenancies, expanding on the details which were included in the earlier editions by Angela. Now, as with all these specialist practitioner titles from this publisher, the advice and detailed knowledge presented in such a readable style, I think, makes this book an important acquisition for any firm, any law firm, specialising in farming matters for landlords and tenants, and that will be extended to people involved with agricultural land generally, because there are other organisations also involved in the countryside. What we found very helpful were the explanations and checklists on form filling, particularly helpful together with all the references to the 2 main pieces of legislation we have, which is the Agricultural Holdings Act of 1986 and then the Agricultural Tenancies Act of 1995, followed by the notices. Now, the book has 2 parts, which we've seen. The first part is one that deals with legal background and basically setting the scene, if you like, and then the second part covers drafting, including notices, precedents, and with probably the best advice and guidance that you'll get or find on the subject in our view. And the date of the publication is the 3rd of March 2018, and I'm recording this in the summer, so the book's been on the market for a couple of months. There it is again, front, side and back. It's not an expensive book either. If I open it in the middle, this is part 2, which is called Notices, Precedents and Forms, and it gives you a lot of advice on drafting. And I do think it's of help, not just to the practitioner, the professional, but also for people who probably can't afford to pay but need to know a bit about it. You've got all the details there, you've got checklists and so forth. This is a standard form agreement here, for instance. And again, I have to say, these agreements are very useful, lots of other precedents as well, but I have to say, quite a lot of agricultural tenancies don't have very much, from what I can see, don't have very much by way of formal agreements. And I'm hoping, certainly to protect the rights of tenants, and of course to landlords as well, because they have duties and obligations, I think it's always very useful to have some formal agreement, so you know exactly, and it's got to be detailed, a bit pompous perhaps, but it will be there for one reason, and that is to make sure that people's interests are protected, and that's what this is about. So once again, big thank you to Wildy, Simmonds and Hill and to Nigel Davis for producing this new edition. Most helpful for all of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.